Good evening, dear viewers. You are watching Orient TV English News Bulletin, and we start off with a look at the latest events taking place in Syria. And in a breaking news we just received right now, Al-Qusur neighborhood in Homs is being heavily bombarded at the moment, and the death toll in the city rises up to 14 today in the absence of the UN forces. And we also received news that the regime forces bombarded the historical church of al-Zinar in Al-Bustan neighborhood, which is heavily populated with Christians. The Syrian Human Rights Network said that 33 people were killed in Syria today, 11 of them in Homs and 3 in Damascus. Meanwhile, the old neighborhoods of Homs were exposed to what is said. The regime forces bombarded the neighborhood of Jurat al-Shia heavily, which killed several civilians while people tried to save them as the regime forces kept bombarding the town. And moving on to Homs, where the neighborhoods are still under bombardment since early hours of the morning, which resulted in burning many residential houses and destroying a mosque. We see more about Homs in the following report. In the town of Qastoun in Hama suburbs, a young man called Abdel Hasib al-Shahda was killed today by the regime forces' fire as he marched in one of the rallies that went out in honor for the victims of Al-Hula massacre. In the meantime, the UN observers till Damascus, where most neighborhoods in Damascus and Aleppo had a general strike announcing civil defiance, which paralyzed the trade movement in the two cities after closing of shops in solidarity with the victims of the revolution and in response to the massacres committed by Al-Assad's regime. The strike included the neighborhoods of Barzeh, Jober and Al-Qadam. Demonstrations continued to call for freedom today, where the residents of the towns of Al-Ibta and Tafas in Dara came out in the morning in solidarity with the besieged cities and towns and to condemn the massacre of Al-Assad's regime. In Zabadani in Damascus suburbs, a funeral was. And to get more information about the situation in Damascus, we have with us Omar, a member of the Revolutionary Command Council from Damascus. Omar, welcome. First of all, can you tell us more about the strike that is taking place in Damascus?
Yes, good evening to you and for your all viewers. Yes, actually, this is just
how long? Yeah, speaking of the time, how long do you think this strike will continue?
Okay, the organizer now.
The Syrian Human Rights Network documented in cooperation with Damascus Center for Human Rights Studies at least 654 points of violations by the Syrian regime for the initiative of the UN envoy Kofi Annan. Damascus and its countryside topped the list with hundreds. The U.S. government website published what was said as photographic evidence of mass graves and attacks on civilian areas by the Syrian government forces. The website, operated by a bureau of the State Department. Prime Minister Sheikh Hamad bin Jassim Al Thani of Qatar said that Annan should set a time limit for his mission and called on the Security Council to put Annan's plan under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter, a measure that could authorize the use of force. Meanwhile, the international peace envoy Kofi Annan warned today that Syria was slipping. Dear viewers, coming up in our bulletin, protesters in Aleppo. Welcome back, dear viewers. Moving on to the city of Aleppo, which witnessed yesterday the largest demonstration since the beginning of the revolution, where demonstrators took to the streets trying to reach Sadal al-Jabiri Square, which is considered the biggest square in Syria. Meanwhile, Al-Assad's security forces committed a massacre in the neighborhood of Al-Sha'ar at Tariq al-Bab, which resulted in the death of 7 victims yesterday. And we received these exclusive pictures. The General Authority of the Revolution said that 802 anti-government demonstrations in Syria came out yesterday in 669 points. Idlib first came with 172 anti-government. A group of Syrian jurists launched the Syrian office to document the crimes of the Syrian regime, where the office will work to collect evidence. The Human Rights Council of the United Nations condemned the Syrian regime of the Houla massacre and called for an investigation conducted by the United Nations to determine the perpetrators and to collect evidence for a possible criminal prosecution. 41 council members agreed. Meanwhile, the Syrian National Council expressed in a statement its appreciation to all the countries that voted for the Human Rights Council resolution and requested from the International Commission for a special investigation on the Houla massacre to bring its perpetrators to justice. The Council declared its support of the resolution, which condemned. Dear viewers, coming up after this break. Welcome back, dear viewers. In the coastal city of Banyas, the regime forces surrounded all the mosques in the southern neighborhoods. Meanwhile, the guerrilla forces were present in massive numbers to prevent the citizens from protesting. Furthermore, the citizens in the mosques of Al-Qbaynat, the city of Aleppo, is still protesting against the regime, while the regime forces carry out military campaigns to silence the protesters in Saad al-Jabiri Square. We see more about Aleppo's updates in the following report. In other news, and through their participation in a seminar in Singapore, the senators Joseph Lieberman and John McCain insisted on the need to move their country towards solving the Syrian crisis. They noted that the European and Arab. The Republican representative Elena Ross, head of the Foreign Affairs Committee of U.S. House of Representatives, indicated her suspicion of the possibility of persuading Russia to assist in the overthrow of President Bashar al-Assad's regime from power. Ross said that she hopes for the administration of the U.S. president, saying in the United States, where members of the Syrian community demonstrated against the Syrian regime in front of the UN building in New York. The demonstrators held independent. Viewers, before we end our bulletin, here's a look at our main headlines. Dear viewers, with this we end our news bulletin from Orient News. Thank you very much for watching, and we meet again tomorrow.